once you get a taste for being able to create something, which we all did on that team, like we created something, it didn't exist the day before, and then 2 years later we had like 20 million users already. And so when you get that taste, it's impossible for you to believe that it was a one-off fluke. You're just like, man, if we can do this, think of the other stuff we can do. All software on Earth is built on top of open source. There's not one piece of software running on any of our consumer devices that isn't built on top of open source. Open source meaning that it was built and available to everybody. And so all of our economies, all of our sectors, all the trillions of dollars of businesses are built on top of public goods.
On today's episode, serial entrepreneur and co-founder of Humanity, Michael Geer. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Mm-hmm. I want
to give my audience a little bit of a brief intro about you, so they have the context of who is the amazing guest today. Mm-hmm. So you're a co-founder of Humanity, an app that's helping people increase their lifespan by tracking their biological age. Also, you're a founding member of Badoo, one of the first and biggest online dating platforms in the world. And you served as a CEO for Anchor Free, which is one of the largest and most innovative VPN companies.
Yep.
I'm keeping it very short.
Yep.
But what's fascinating to me is that all of that started with this very realistic and humble dream of becoming an astronaut.
Yeah, exactly.
So please zap me back in time and into the world of young Michael.
Sure. I think, I was always kind of surrounded by, loving people. Like, I had one of those privileged kind of upbringings where like, people were, we moved a bit, like we moved from New York down to Florida, we moved schools a bit, but always had very supportive parents. And I think the other thing that I was constantly exposed to was, and I think having that kind of support and stability is so helpful. I think strife from time to time is good. It's almost like longevity, like short-term strife, great. Long-term strife has a kind of deadening effect, I think. And the other thing, I was just always had this kind of narrative from many people in my family where like it was okay to be a little bit outside of the system. It was okay to rebel a little bit. My grandfather, really, the expression is jumped off the boat, no, he really jumped off the boat into New York Harbor.
Literally.
But his sincerity of intention was what allowed him to stay in the country. Like he even got like turned in by his neighbor at some point. They were giving like $50 for turning in your illegal neighbors in New York at the time. And he gets pulled into the immigration office, and they start, berating might be a strong word, but like, what do you think? You can be here illegally, all this stuff, what do you want? He's like, I want to live here. I want to be, a US citizen. And they're like, fine.
No way.
And you talk about like, sliding doors or whatever the expression is, like that could have gone where, Michael Geer doesn't exist if they had, kicked him back to Ireland.
That's crazy.
Right?
And with that one stamp?
One stamp, he was legal. It was a quick process back then.
Wow.
He spent, the next next few decades, helping cousins come over that wanted to come over. Obviously brought, my grandma, his wife, over. My mom was the first one born in New York City. So started that whole, the O'Sullivans in the U.S. And then, later it was actually funny. I went back and I'm living here and working here in London with an Irish passport. So I'm not sure what I think my grandfather would be, quite okay with it, but it's kind of funny. Like he struggled so much to get over to the U.S. and then
full circle.
Yeah. But I think all those things are so great because they basically, I think, put the foundation of who I am. Like I am very sensitive to things about immigration and giving people the right to self-determine and just treat people like humans and try not to get into policy discussions. Try to get into more human discussions. And I think that's been the guiding lights. When I joined that consumer VPN, it was I just think people should all have access to information. Let's just keep it very basic. Let's make sure that governments do not have the right to take away that right, kind of thing. Give that power to people, where it's give them the option to do what they want as long as they're not hurting other people. And that's kind of flowed through. And I think when we came to, what do we want to do in health? And I can go into like more of a backstory on that, but it was basically like we need to give people the superpower. We need to empower people to actually be able to protect themselves from disease. And that's been the basis of why we created, Humanity. So.
Hi everyone! Today's episode is sponsored by Momo Kombucha, my favorite non-alcoholic drink, together with water. I've now been drinking Momo Kombucha for around 6 months, and I really love their product because they're healthy, they're delicious, they keep coming out with these new flavors and limited editions, watermelon that I tried recently that I was obsessed with. So if you want to try Momo Kombucha and you haven't yet, feel free to use the discount code ISTHISIT15 to get a 15% discount off your first order. So in everything you do, I sense a strong desire to help people, help the humanity. So where did that come from?
I think it's innate. I think it's in all of us, actually. I think I'm reading my manifesto of the moment to give a shout out to a book. It's called Humankind, A Hopeful History. So the author's Bregman, Rutger, I believe. And it really kind of is a great book. I'll bring you a copy.
Thank you.
It basically kind of just says what I think all of us kind of feel when we're interacting with humans. When we get theoretical and we're talking, we're watching the news.
When we get too much in our head, yeah.
Yeah, and when we're talking about things thousands of miles away, we have all kinds of theories. And some of them I think very bad, and some of them, possibly true. But when we're in the same room with humans, I think it is very clear to us that we want to get along. Like, it's amazing how fights end when you get into a room with people, and weird things happen. We somehow find ways forward which we didn't think we could find.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been my experience and probably just my innate belief for a long time, is that how could there be 8 billion of us on this planet and we haven't blown it up yet? But 8 billion people, and we must have a primal instinct to get along.
Definitely. I mean, I definitely agree with that. But what's very curious to me is always to find that a process and the times and moments of understanding for people when they realize that. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, do you know what your purpose is?
I feel my purpose is to empower people, and I feel like health is
the way to go.
Place. Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in making sure that we keep the climate and environment of Earth protected. I'm very interested. I'm vegetarian. I want to be vegan. I'm not there yet. Very interested in protecting all beings. Mm-hmm. But I feel like my purpose, and what I'll spend probably the rest of my life on, is to allow people to be healthy for much, much longer. Because I think that basis, and that includes mental health. I don't separate those two things, which also leads to...
As you shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of these things that I think will end soon, where we stop talking about physical and mental, because it's all together.
It is all together.
Yeah, so to empower people to be happy and healthy for much longer.
So when did you have that awareness, or do you think you always intuitively knew that that's what it is? I want a little bit more know about that journey or that moment of discovery for you when you had that realization, oh, this is what I'm meant to do.
Yep. I think the early of it was wanting to be an astronaut was just my representation. 5-year-old keeps that to 17-year-olds. It starts to get weirder and weirder as a 17-year-old still believes they can be an astronaut. But actually these days, I guess it's not as weird. You can buy a ticket. But it was that I want to somehow do something that brings the human race forward. It's great to be a doctor. It's great to be, these very noble professions, but keeping the status quo wasn't as interesting to me.
Maintenance versus progress.
Yeah, exactly. And so that moving forward and being a significant or, meaningful part of that, contributing in a meaningful way, was definitely the beginning of that. I think the pivotal thing that led me to health as the purpose, as the more specific purpose, was I had a family member, a relative, and then later on a high school friend basically find out stage 4 of cancer. Passed away very soon after that, both of them. And in those moments, it was just very clear that everything else fell away. Everything else that was important, disappeared. And so it was very clear that although want to move the human race forward, if all that stuff that was let's make it to other planets, let's do, all this stuff that the human race needs to extend over millennia. If we couldn't keep this person that we loved, a human next to us alive and healthy, everything else kind of fell away. And so I think in those moments, it was basically, that's when I started to understand, okay, there needs to be more people focused on this thing. And I didn't actually, in the beginning think that I was very interested in it. Mm-hmm. And I probably had an arrogant belief that I could find people and just start connecting them and be like that kind of behind the scenes, push, kind of encourage. I actually still do that to this day. Sometimes I'm just on phone calls and meeting people because I just want to encourage them. I'm like, that's awesome what you're doing. You should really do that more. I know you're going to do it anyway, but I just wanted to tell you that I think you definitely
should. You're on the right path, yeah.
I feel like, my personal opinion, you're on the right path. You should do more of that, kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to learn more. I wanted to so I started with early detection of cancer. I had left Badu, moved to New York, and had started
there's so many spin-offs that we need to go into. But okay, so exactly. Let's talk about, as we're on the topic, let's talk about Humanity. So for people that don't know, what is it exactly?
So Humanity is basically a navigation app for your health, just like traffic navigation. So it allows you to monitor your rate of aging. So it gives you that feedback loop, am I getting healthier or am I not getting healthier? Mm-hmm. Very simple. And then it actually figures out what group of actions will make you healthier. So if you want to use the traffic analogy, it's what is the path of least resistance? What's the quickest path that you can take to be healthier?
To a person.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so as we get, now it's personalized to cohorts. As we get more and more data, it'll start to be more and more personalized to Dana, more and more personalized to Mike.
I see. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what sort of indicators, how does that look? What sort of does it, I guess, because I have the app, so I know how it works a little bit. It tracks, sure, I have an Oura Ring, so it takes information from my Oura Ring about my physical activity. Obviously, I'm tracking my sleep, so it tracks that as well. Then there are some things where you check in yourself manually, which is, have you spoken to a friend? Have you been out in the nature, seen some daylight, things like that.
Yep.
So what makes it different than anything else in the market?
So when we started building Humanity, I'll give you a short kind of story. When we started talking to investors, all of them generally were quite excited about it. But many of them kind of as helpful, they thought helpful advice was hey, you're trying to do too much at one time. I actually had to Google this expression. I didn't know it before that time, but you're trying to boil the ocean.
Interesting. Boiling
the ocean, I guess, is an expression that means trying to do too much at one time. You're biting off more than you can chew, whatever. But our hypothesis, which we've now proven out, I think quite convincingly, is that if you don't have that full loop, which is basically you have some way of truly measure, is the person getting healthier? Is their probability of disease going down? And then watching the actions they're taking, and then measuring again to give them that feedback loop and to figure out if those actions actually worked for them or not. If you don't have that whole system, you don't actually head in a particular direction. Now, I'll give you an example. So there's a lot of amazing, testing, companies. Some of them better than others, but definitely a bunch of really high quality ones.
You mean DNA?
Yeah, testing different ways. I think, even testing biological age, I think, which I think is almost everybody, when they say they want to be healthier, they mean they just want to be disease-free and, fully functional for longer, right? And so there are, I think, a decent amount of testing companies that are decent at kind of telling you that. I think most of them, there's pricing, there's UX, there's all these kind of things, but decent.
So you're saying,
right?
but what do I do about it? I have the results.
So then
what?
yeah, exactly. So then okay, you do a test, and then you do a bunch of stuff, and then 3 months or 4 months later, you do another test. Like how can, like, why you can't leave it to me, you, or the person on the street to figure out, okay, what was all the stuff that I did in the middle that in which thing worked? Because we're going to have cognitive bias about, like, oh, well, we just really actually concentrate on that thing, but at the same time we were doing this other thing that might have been the thing that, And so if you don't actually do that full loop or measure, monitor everything they're doing, and so we're the only system out there right now that's doing that full loop.
I see.
And doing that full loop, not to an abstracted, importantly, not to an abstracted kind of VO2 max or something like that, but actually like probability of disease. VO2, name your HRV, VO2 max, kind of extracted kind of a popular measure that's not actually, at its base saying whether you're actually reducing your probability of disease or not, which is what everybody cares about.
So from what I understand, there's a plan. So far it's an app, but there's a plan to then later on integrate it with physical tests and make it even more precise. And everything's data-driven.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think it's important to note that one of the things that actually did surprise us, so I definitely understand when other people, it's not intuitive for other people, is the digital markers, so your movement pattern and your heart rate pattern. And we partner up with different companies, including Giro, on those algorithms. That is actually very close to the same predictive power as doing your bloods. Oh. When you add the two together, you get slightly higher. So by combining different markers, you can get more and more predictive power. But the digital markers actually is quite predictive. So.
Interesting. Okay, so when you were talking a little bit earlier about kind of the mission, there's a little bit of a conundrum with longevity, at least in my mind. So if you succeed, and we're able to prolong people's lives significantly, hundreds of years, or maybe even indefinitely.
Yeah.
First of all, side note, are we getting there? Slowly? How fast?
I think we're definitely at a speed where we can add decades, and that will give us time to add more. And so I feel like we're going at a good speed. When I say we, I mean like the entire industry.
Will I arrive at 150?
I think so.
Excellent. I hope you're not just telling me that because I want to hear it.
Watch out for buses, but yeah.
Facts. Okay, so to finish the question. So say everyone can now live to 200, 300 years.
Yep.
How? Is that only accessible to the ultra-rich? Will that create an even huger, bigger divide and even new modern era of slavery / Ready Player One, complete zombie land of people that just live in boxes and have actually zero autonomy because they just live in meta?
Yep.
How is that not going to happen?
I was going to say, I'll take option 2.
Yeah. Are the demographics so significantly? If so, why? And is that even good? How? Resources? What are we fixing in order to be able to afford people to live hundreds of years?
Yep. I think we've been, I don't want to oversimplify this, but I think we've been sold one business model and told that that's health. And that business model is kind of and this is not vilifying the pharma companies, because I think vilifying folks is not the way to actually have an open conversation. And actually, like, many people in health believe that there's only one model, is that basically you spend billions of dollars, you create something that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars or $100,000, you get a patent on it, and you charge $100,000 for enough years that you make back your billions of dollars that you put into it. We're no longer in that era. We haven't been in that era for a while, but we still believe that is the only model that exists. And we kind of, I don't want to use too many of the terms from the book, but I should have given it to you beforehand. But we kind of nocebo each other into believing that that's the case. And so it's like the opposite of a placebo. A placebo makes you, does something good for you, It's in your mind, but it does something good for you. And nocebo is it's in your mind, but it does something bad for you. And basically, we nocebo each other into basically saying, hey, because the foundational kind of connotation to some of these questions is, well, healthcare stuff's going to be expensive. And so we kind of nocebo each other into being okay with the fact that that next company is making it their next $100,000 thing. So to get back to your question, I think it's very possible to make, our things freemium. So we make sure that all the functionality that you need to do to guide yourself towards better health is kept free. And then the premium features are some stuff that are, I think, additive and make the experience more powerful, but are not needed.
Essential, yeah.
Essential. I think there's some longevity drug companies. So one of our SAB, Kristen Fortney, runs a company called BioAge. She's probably one of the furthest into human trials in a really awesome drug that will help you with muscle atrophy. So as you get older, your muscles atrophy, you fall, you break something, it's the whole spiral. Her intention is to not be charging, a ton of money for that.
Is there a remedy for that? If you keep being physically active and exercise completely throughout your whole life, do you get muscle atrophy?
It's very hard to avoid some level of atrophy. Basically, what you're doing, if you do enough strength training, you're kind of keeping some of those proteins and kind of pathways open at a higher level, which will reduce your muscle atrophy as you get older. There are times where it's impossible to avoid, though. They'll be using their drug is tested first in older people that have bed rest. So basically, they're in a hospital and they can't move, and so there will be moments where it's necessary to take drugs like that. But it's an example of a company that's not going to be charging thousands and thousands of dollars for their drug, right? And so I think it's incumbent upon us to not nocebo each other and actually set the social norm at a level, because the actual production value and research and development needed for these things does not necessitate, because everybody's going to need it because the volume's there, right? It doesn't necessitate charging $100,000 for it. And so we just basically need to keep each other to that, code.
100% hear you, but I guess my question was more about, I believe that the medical solutions to longevity could be more accessible than I would think, or a lot of people would think. But the real question is about the resources.
Yep.
There's still now full countries that are, mostly on the verge of famine. So my question is more about, if we live longer and developed world consumes so much energy, so much electricity, creating so much pollution with the consumerism.
Yep.
That part of it. So if our lifespan triples or quadruples,
yep,
how can the planet sustain it with continuous, I would hope, still reproduction of new humans being born?
Yep.
That is my question.
I think I don't have the answer to what will happen in the long term. I think birth rate will definitely drop. I mean, it already has dropped dramatically in countries that have a certain GDP, certain middle class. So I think the birth rate will drop. Basically, all the charts show, even if you add in this assumption that people are going to live a lot longer, is we will plateau. And the hope is that it will be a plateau and not kind of a crash in some areas, which would also be detrimental. So overpopulation doesn't seem to be mathematically possible, even if you start doubling people's lives. So that's one part, but that doesn't answer the question of I think distribution is probably at the heart of our problems, because it's not a resource problem. We have tons of resources.
Agreed.
It's the uneven distribution of them that is definitely, I very much agree, is something that needs to be continually tackled better.
Can that be solved if people that are at the helm of the distribution are interested in keeping it that way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too political, but I think on a set, probably not political, but more kind of like I'm definitely a believer in decentralization. I'm definitely a believer in that we don't need to be giving so much power, and kind of we don't need to be giving so much power to centralized entities that are not necessarily knowledgeable of what the needs of the particular community that we live in are.
Yeah.
I don't think we any longer really need that. I think, we'll transition to more and more decentralized. I think as we decentralize, one of the superpowers that actually gets maximized is human connection works really well when we actually can be in the same room together.
Yeah.
Or the same, community hall together, right? And I think as you decentralize, it's easier for us to make sure that we don't that we don't dehumanize people, that we don't make anti-human decisions, that we actually care, about this decision will lead to this happening to this family,
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of human connection, you co-founded Humanity together with Pete.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, why and how did you decide that you
Why
want
is
to
Pete
do
not
business with? Well, we should definitely get Pete on.
Yeah.
But yeah, how did you decide that you want to work with him, or what made you decide that he would be a good person to do business with?
Yeah, one of my favorite, very truthful things to say when we kind of give the backstory of Humanity is that when I started to have the general idea for Humanity, I didn't have a short list of people I wanted to do it with. I had a one-person list, and that was Pete.
Really?
And so a lot of serendipitous stuff happened. So we were building Badu. We started that in Moscow, moved over to London in the course of that.
We will go way back and past because there's like whole boxes to be unpacked. Yeah.
And so me and Andre and the Badu team, me and Pete were kind of the two people in the London tech scene at the time that were doing highly viral, direct-to-consumer businesses. It actually wasn't that common at the time. And so he was doing a social network called Wayne, Where Are You Now? And I was doing Badu. And so I think different people in the community was like, oh, you should talk to Pete or you should talk to Mike, And so we finally had a coffee. And it was one of those things like, I can't remember almost anything that happened in those years specifically. It's just like working. But we remember specifically the table and the place that we had that coffee at. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while when we have a meeting and we're passing by, we'll stop and have a coffee in the same table. Wow. And this was 2008. And so we met then, we kind of gained like a respect for each other and then, just became friends. I jumped on for a few months when I left Badu and we worked together at Wayne. So he was my boss.
That's a good way to test somebody.
Yeah, well, it was
excellent way.
Yeah, it was actually really serendipitous because a lot of times if you put two really good, leaders or operators together, people know this in sports, like it doesn't always add up.
Yeah.
But we found out that we were actually extremely complementary to each other. Like in a very, very kind of like it was meant to be kind of way. He's amazing at building teams. He's amazing at kind of really, leading teams and building them and really caring about, the health of the company. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's maybe not my strong suit. I love humans, but sometimes I'm not, the best caring manager. But strong suits of like, digging in, being able to build stuff, being able to understand complicated, on the surface, complicated stuff quickly and how we can, leverage that to give people superpowers. That's more my strong suit. And so I think we realized that working together at Wayne. And so when I started, not to give a long story, but when I started kind of having the idea for Humanity, I knew that I needed Pete to really help me, bring it to reality and actually bring it to the world. And so I started a campaign, maybe for about a 2-year campaign of convincing Pete that what I believed was true, is that we could actually affect change and actually help people live longer. Starting with a few Guinness in Web Summit in Dublin, one of the last years it was there. Yeah, there's pictures around somewhere. So yeah.
Okay, well, we have moved very much to almost the present time with Humanity. I want to help us unfold the journey of how you got there. So a big turning point in your life was when you moved from US to Russia. So before that happened, you mentioned that you changed your mind about being an astronaut when you went to the Lockheed Martin.
Yep.
What was it, headquarters or?
It was one of their major factories at the time. Probably
What
still is,
happened
but-
there that you changed your mind?
So I did aerospace engineering and international affairs in school because I had this, I think I did 30 seconds of research one time that like aerospace engineer and Air Force pilot
How to be an
were
astronaut. Okay.
it was good directed research, but it was probably about, being a 17-year-old, it was like 30 seconds of it was basically like, what were the careers of the people that ended up being astronauts? And then those were the two top ones. And so I didn't know how to be an Air Force pilot, so I decided I was going to be a, aerospace engineer. I've become a bit of a, I would say a pacifist as I've gotten older, very much against, killing of humans for any reason. There's no justification. But at the time, I'm a 20-year-old kid. I didn't have those kind of deep thoughts probably, or not as much. And so basically if you're an aerospace engineer at Georgia Tech, one of the main, employers after school is Lockheed Martin. It's the biggest defense contractor. They make the most weapons on Earth. And so I went to a visit, and seemingly quite cool. It was like, the 40-year-old, now basically the age I am now, the guy was basically giving us a tour. He was one of the top, aerospace engineers at Lockheed Martin, at least in that factory. And so he was like, okay, they were making, I believe, the F-22 at the time. And it was the newest, coolest, Air Force plane. And he was giving us a tour of that. And then there was a moment where, and that's all fine, cool planes. There was a moment where then he points up to the rafters and he's like, and we got the missiles too. And you look up and there's like missiles in the rafters. But there was there was a disconnect between his happiness and his excitement and like where
the missiles
that missile would end up, right? And we all know that the intent for a missile to end up and, only, blow up a
something in someone,
thing is not what happens. There is, always collateral damage. So yeah, it was that moment where there's something kind of just, all these things I think we all experience is like something just doesn't sit right with us, I think is the expression, right? It's not that you have oh my God, I can't believe he pointed up to the rafters and was excited about the missiles, but it's like something that didn't sit right about him being so, the smile and the happiness and it didn't go together. And so I think from that moment, really, from that tour on that particular day, I just kind of quickly lost interest in following that path because I was very, I might have been confident, but I also knew that, it was like 1% of 1% of aerospace engineers made it to NASA. And NASA was like the only real employer back then of, actually doing space stuff. And so I think that coupled with, and I've gone back and psychoanalyzed this a little bit, but at the time, again, wasn't thinking in these terms. I watched like The Hunt for Red October, great movie, Sean Connery. Watched that movie probably one too many times and kind of like, I was obsessed really with this idea of the other, and the other was very strongly, so, your group and then there's the other. And so the other very strongly in those days, in many of the movies, but just in real life, was for people in the US was the Soviet Union and then Russia, right?
Interesting.
That was,
but the other meaning the antagonist, or?
Yeah. You could say antagonist, or most of the time the other is shown as an antagonist. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And so you saw that as antagonist, and you're like, okay, let me go to the antagonist, figure out what it's about.
But The Hunt for Red October, and anybody that has kids or loves Disney movies, because most Disney movies I won't actually let my kid watch, because it's like someone fighting, good versus evil and kill all the, it's like, I get there's a strong female character, but like they're killing each other.
That's a whole different topic as well. It's like, Okay, let me tell you again.
I love Disney parks, but I feel I think a lot of content companies completely miss the mark, especially when they're trying to make stuff for kids, and it's not really,
Yes.
I think, teaching the right lessons. But I was going to say Moana is a great example of another where there's the other, but then you find out that actually the other and the antagonist and protagonist meet, and they actually find out that they're actually very similar, and they come together in some way.
Yeah.
And I just, to this day, if you want to know which movie I'm going to love, you can predict it very well by, if that's the storyline, I'm going to love it. So it wasn't that it was like a war movie and they were fighting each other and I want to go see the antagonist. It was more like, oh, I kind of want to see like how this plays out. Sean Connery seems pretty cool. Obviously not actually from Lithuania. questionable pronunciation of words, but yeah. So I went over I was like, I just want to go see Moscow, right? And so one of my best friends in high school, Larissa, she's I think she was born in the U.S., but her parents were born in Ukraine, and so she was going to go on a study abroad that was going to go from University of Florida to Moscow, and I was like, oh no, I'll go with you on that. She ended up, I think, meeting some cute guy and like not going, and I was like, I'm still going by myself.
You went,
yeah, and just loved it. Like I just.
So did you go with the thought of, okay, I'm going to be working here, I'm moving here?
No, I think at that point
just a visiting.
I think I was just like, I just want to go see the place. I think I had very little thought process. Like people ask me, did you go see like Star City? I was like, no, I didn't. I got off the plane and I never even like thought about the space program when I was over there. I just like went and just wanted to see.
So how did you go from that moment to starting Badoo together with Andre and just living there and calling that home? How long were you in Russia for?
So that first trip, I was there for like 8 weeks. That was in 2001. Then I came home, and then I did a bunch of stuff, and then went back in 2003. And I was there for 4 years that time. And so, yeah, it was kind of as anybody that's moved to a very foreign place to where they were born, it's all relative. They'll kind of know what I'm talking about. It's like, it's kind of like you're on the 6-month plan repetitively. You're like, I'll stay for 6 months. Let's see how it is, and then I'll decide. And then you're like, as you near the end of the 6 months, you're like, I'll stay for another 6 months, right? And it's a roller coaster. Being so far from what you know I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. Like it was a roller coaster. But I think that's with anybody that moves far away from home.
What made you stay?
I think I was in my 20s. It was exciting. It was free. Like it was like the mobility between everybody was just so quick.
What do you mean by that?
Like it was, some of the places that you can quickly move from kind of one, kind of a novice level in an industry to being kind of like the top person. Like, and then there's other places where like it's very hard to, move from one level to the next. And everything was changing. So, they had made it through, that entire area, including all the CIS. They had made it through this kind of 90s, like, I mean, you know it probably better than I. And it was now in a more calm, stable-ish, time, but it still had the quickness of change that was quite exciting for, a person in their 20s.
Okay, so you said that you met Andre, and then you had this idea, and then Badoo was born, right? So I have one question though.
It's more details there, but
No, I'm very curious about it because for example, on your LinkedIn, it says that you were on the founding team. So from that story, are you a co-founder? And is there any little founding drama that I should be knowing about?
I like these questions. At a certain point, I was legally told that I should say founding team.
I intuitively understood.
But I think it'd be more honest to say, because now I've been a founder of things, I think, so I was there before Badoo existed. I was there while we created Badoo. I was there. So founding team doesn't capture it. Founding team is usually in our space reserved for the first hires. I was never hired into anything because it didn't exist.
Okay.
So I was there as we created
So you
it
came together, you met,
Yeah.
you brainstormed, you came up with this idea.
Yeah, I mean, and to give a bit more detail, I think so I was hired by Andre for a project that he was running in the Russian-speaking markets called Mamba, and so it was I would say it was similar. It was similar to Badoo in the sense that it wasn't kind of like find your next wife or husband. It was more of a meet new people.
Yeah.
Which eventually became our tagline. Which, I created that tagline. It sounds hilarious to say you created the tagline, meet new people.
Hey, that's the big tagline.
But that was kind of the ethos even of this other system. And it was a white label system that kind of ran a lot of the portals, Znakomstva section, so meeting section, right?
Yes.
And so at a certain point, we tried to internationalize that. And there were some very good reasons why that didn't work. One of the top ones being none of us had ever done international BD. So could have predicted that wasn't going to work. And it was also like you're coming with like 5 million Russian-speaking users and being like, hey, we want to start an Italian section of this. It just always... And so at a certain point, we're like, why do we keep doing that sale? Why don't we like start something completely new? As a founder, I would say, honestly, like Andre brought all the money to it.
I see.
And so I think I should still be able to call myself a co-founder, but I think it is honest to say that he continually was the person that brought money to the project. He brought investors. I
can imagine as he was a local entrepreneur that had established.
He had a great track record of making investors money. Yeah. He did a lot of great projects, and so I think that was that always gives me pause to kind of like, founding team doesn't cover it.
Okay.
That was more than founding team.
Yeah, I wanted to know.
Co-founder also seems like, but then again, there's a lot of co-founder. It seems slightly too much, but like there's a lot of co-founders that don't do anything to raise money, too. So yeah,
I see.
I'll leave it on that. But I think that's in the end, I don't think there's any tension. I think. When Andre, when I was leaving, I tried to leave a few times, and it was always this kind of, because I think once you get a taste for being able to create something, which we all did on that team, like we created something, it didn't exist the day before, and then 2 years later we had like 20 million users already. And so when you get that taste, like it's impossible for you to believe that it was a one-off fluke. You're just like, man, if we can do this, think of the other stuff we can do, right? And so when I started getting interested in health because of, the family member with cancer, and then it was very hard for me to keep staying and doing Badoo. I found interesting things that piqued my technical interest, like how do you do location-based stuff, and so we did a lot of cool stuff that pushed forward Badoo, but I was constantly kind of on the way out. The
purpose was lacking behind the type of product.
Yeah, and I believed in the purpose of, we really did want people to meet in real life. Like that was our focus all the time. And for better or for worse, I know some people have had good experiences on dating apps and some not so good, but I think it was a net positive that we introduced to the world in the sense that we were able to scale it. We weren't the first person with the idea, but like we were able to scale a system where people really just go onto an app and can meet a new person in their city. And that I'm proud of, and I was proud of at the time too. But it was time to move on. And the last conversation I had with Andre while we were still working together, I've seen him many, many times since then, was, Badoo's going to be successful. You already know it's really successful, but you're going to have to be here for 10 years before you sell this thing. And I think, I don't want to speak for Andre, but I think we both at a certain level kind of wanted to try new things, and so the interesting thing was he sold Badoo the month to 10 years from us having that conversation. So,
Really?
and I would definitely not give up those 10 years and everything else I did. So,
Wow.
so I think we both are pretty happy.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that. I guess from technical perspective, what happens if you exit a company earlier? What happens to your share, financial, whatever remuneration?
Yeah, I mean, it can happen many different ways. Some people hold on to it depends on your contract. Many people will be able to hold on to their shares, or they might have to exercise their options and then have shares and they can hold on to them. I generally wanted to kind of have a cleanish break, so I eventually sold my shares back to Andre.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of it's always a choice of hold on to them. But I think sometimes, especially when you're like a co-founder, you kind of want to.
You're still invested if you're holding shares, and you're still very invested.
It's kind of your mind will still be a little bit beholden, and I kind of wanted to just cut that.
So interesting. That's kind of the opposite of what people sometimes preach when they say, oh, be in so many pots at the same time, own everything, manage nothing.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very interesting.
Well, I would equate it more the reason to sell your shares, and and especially if you think the company's going to be successful. And I knew the company was just going to get more and more successful. We were basically printing money when I left. The reason to sell your shares, I would equate more to kind of like, being the neighbor of a ex-girlfriend or boyfriend. It's kind of like, keeping some kind of, or like still working with them or something like that. It's like, yes, we are both adults and we have moved on, but like it's always going to be a little bit of a drag on your head to.
Because you're thinking, what if I stayed longer? What if I did that?
Yeah, or it's hard to transition to so if I was just an investor in Badoo, then yeah, I would definitely have held my shares because I'm like, yeah, it's just going to go up in value. I mean, no one should cry for me. I didn't do badly. but I think but as being in a kind of like work, kind of marriage with Andre for years, I was just kind of like, yeah, let's.
Yeah, you wanted to focus all your attention to the next project that you were going to do. So about Badoo, at some point, obviously incredibly successful. At some point, it was the most downloaded app in more than 20 countries. What do you attribute its success to most?
When you're building a system, staying true to the mission and the product mission is very key. And
what's the difference between mission and product mission?
Really just like the mission with Badoo was, I'll give the concrete example. So the mission with Badoo was to meet new people. Everything we did was to get humans to meet other humans easier and in real life. And so there's many times during that kind of product journey where there was a lot of cool stuff that we could build, and we would start to build it, but then we realized it wasn't actually maybe aligned with people meeting in real life. All types of social stuff. This will date us, but like we were like creating like tagging photos at the same time that like Facebook was creating tagging photos. Like kind of like it was back in those days. And then we're like, but this isn't tagging photos is not leading people to meet for coffee or meet for a date. It's like not. And so we continually would kind of realize sooner than later that, okay, well, actually that function shouldn't be there. Like we need to get back on the track here. I think the other thing that was, with any of these things, you never get it right all the time, but we were just obsessed. Like we were obsessed with the detail. We were obsessed with, we lost all fear of creating new things because we did it so many times, because a lot of the stuff didn't exist, right? Like, it wasn't, we were putting our own servers into, we were propping up whole, server companies that are large to this day, like Terramark. Like we were just like flying over to Miami to put, because when South America started, taking off for Badu, we'd have to like put a bunch of servers because there's a good connection out of Miami there. And so we were just consistently going super deep on stuff, and sometimes maybe too deep, but like I think we more times than not got it right. Payments, we were just obsessive about it. I was flying to Italy to like have dinner with the guy who ran like Telecom Italia so that he trusted me, so that we could run, subscription on premium SMS. Like super non-sexy stuff did make a difference. And that's the kind of, I think that's the kind of determination, but also I think belief. So we believed that each of these things was possible, so we were willing to like fly to Italy to have that meeting. We were walking into like mobile aggregators and being like, hey, you have a great business going in South America, but I think it'd be great if we could do, again, say like subscription. And they'd be like, we can't do subscription. The mobile operators say no. We're like, we'll fly down. Let's go in together. Let's see what they say. Back to kind of like giving like pep talks and like convincing people like, no, you guys have a great thing here. You have a great relationship with them. You just need an example like Badu to walk in with. And they'd be like, okay, yeah, whatever. We want your business. So we would go and do stuff like that. And I think that was very different than definitely many of the startups that were in the London tech scene. And I think very different than a lot of startups. We were willing to get outside of our box and go and create stuff that had to be created, kind of thing. And I'd like to think that we keep that ethos with humanity. We have ideas of what the industry needs, and we're not afraid to go and encourage people to come together and create consortiums and go and do stuff. So.
Fascinating. I'm so excited because you shared so many great tips for anyone that's listening, that's on their own entrepreneurial journey. So speaking about that, if you could go, knowing everything that you know right now and so many companies that you work for and founded, if you could go back in time and tell yourself something about this entrepreneurial journey that you think would create the biggest impact for you, what would it be?
It's a great question. I'm not very good with regrets. I know the question's not about regret, but I think that also makes me kind of not terribly introspective of what I could have done different a long time ago.
It's rather not even from that light. It's like, say it's not even you.
Yep.
Say you can just be that ghost of future for some new budding entrepreneur listening right now.
Yeah.
And if they knew that thing or these couple of things, it would really help them on their journey.
Yep. And I would even take it outside of entrepreneur, but I think it applies as well. Yeah, and thanks for phrasing it like that. I think the one thing that I've found and I continue to find, and no matter what level you are in the world, like I'm somewhere in the middle, I started out, somewhere down here, right? If you're passionate about something and you reach out to the top person in that space, and they're almost always the top person because they're terribly passionate about that thing, a lot of times they'll meet with you. And a lot of times they'll give you an hour, they'll give you a half hour. And I think I've seen this kind of with my team over the years, where like younger people on the team, they'll bring me something. They'll be like, oh, I found this cool project that's happening. This, this person over there, or this cool research or whatever. I'm like, we should talk to her. We should call her up. And they're like, yeah, we should call her up. I was like, no, we should call her up.
Really?
We should, she's doing amazing stuff. We need to talk to her. We should send her an email right now, kind of thing, right? Or we should find a number for her, right? And I think that has led to very, very great things. And I think once you do it a few times, you just have you know that it's possible. And then every time you're in a situation like that, it's like the first thing on your mind is like, if I'm so impressed by what this person has accomplished, if I talk to them, there's no way I won't learn more important stuff. And so I think a lot of times we too much kind of see the people leading a space as like out there and ethereal and kind of like unreachable.
Yeah.
And I haven't found that ever actually to be true. So
amazing. That is a great advice. I'll be taking notes. I hope everyone else is as well. So okay, so we've gone through the Badu journey. Now, next thing that you did that was really big was this anchor-free VPN company. First of all, for people listening that have no idea what VPN is, what is it?
So VPN, it's been a while since I've explained what a VPN is. Trying to think of technical or basically a VPN. So when you're on your device, whether it be your phone or your laptop, when you're reaching out to a website or something on that device, you're basically crossing the open internet. So basically anybody in between, say your internet service provider, or even like the Wi-Fi, whoever's running the Wi-Fi at the coffee shop, and then the internet service provider, and then a couple other people in the middle can actually see that traffic in some way. If it's HTTPS, they can't see certain packets, but they can still see some metadata. So you're kind of crossing an open space to get to the server where the website is hosted and then back. A VPN basically lives on your device. It basically protects, puts a wrapper around all the information coming on and off of your device, brings it directly to the VPN server, and then from there it can do a lot of cool stuff to basically obfuscate, like not allow people on the open internet to understand what that traffic is, brings it back to the VPN server, then back to you, and kind of does that. The reason to use a VPN is you don't want people on the open internet to be able to kind of know where your traffic is going. The main reason why we built, I didn't start Anchor Free. Two great guys, David and Eugene, started it. A great team, amazing team. I joined up later on.
Side note, do you always use VPN?
Yeah.
Always?
Yeah.
Years?
Yeah. I don't always just use a VPN. Many times I'll just stay on my mobile connection and use a VPN so that I don't even have to use...
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times,
So should everyone be using VPN?
I think so, yeah.
I have a VPN, but I don't use it because it usually makes things slower.
Yeah. If you're at home, if you're in a coffee shop, you should definitely use a VPN. Okay. If you're using a common Wi-Fi hotspot, yeah, you should definitely use a VPN.
Okay. Home is fine. Public.
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to... So one of the main reasons that I joined Anchor Free was I believed in people's ability to access information around the world and not to be blocked for whatever reason. So in those cases, people would be at home and they wouldn't be able to reach websites because the government had decided that those websites would be blocked. Mm-hmm. And so in those cases, those were the people that really needed to use the VPN to get to just the open internet that me and you enjoy every day.
Yeah.
And that was the main mission of the company. We grew it to like 900 million users, like just mind-boggling.
That's almost a billion.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And we ended up being in all the like Samsung phones. We ended up running the VPN for all the antivirus players, so the McAfee's and the Bitdefenders and the Kaspersky's of the world. And most of our user base, like 650 million, was just direct downloads of our apps. And we had different apps, but Hotspot Shield being the biggest one. Mm. And so that was a fantastic second, step for me, because it was, one, the mission got bigger.
Yeah.
The impact eventually got bigger, as in like we reached more people. Very serendipitously, it gave me an excuse to actually hang out with Tim Berners-Lee, which is one of the highlights of my life. I would say career, but that's life. So Tim Berners-Lee was the guy who invented the World Wide Web. Still alive and very doing great things to this day. And so, yeah, I got to spend some time going around DC, knocking on doors, fighting for net neutrality. Some very surreal situations, like me, Tim, and Nancy Pelosi in a small room kind of situation.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to meet Tim. Everybody wants that photo op. But seeing Tim kind of answer this question of like, what do you think the impact of your, Tim in my mind is kind of the height of what you can do impact-wise. You can have different impacts that are large, but he's kind of like, he made sure it got to everybody. It didn't hurt him all. The guy's never gonna, buy his own drink for the rest of his life. He's doing perfectly fine for himself. Beautiful life, right?
I should sure hope so.
Yeah, but it was like,
one of those stories where, you're a genius, you're an artist, you're like Nobel Peace, and then you die of poverty and hunger because you're not recognized.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we need need to do more in society to avoid these kind of Tesla situation, the Nikolai Tesla kind of situations, like that. Tim's not living that situation. He's living a good life, but also like a continually curious, continually giving, continually trying to push forward things. And so people would, every single senator in congressperson would ask, what do you think the impact of your, invention was? And he was like, and he had to explain this every time. I didn't invent the internet. That was like Vint Cerf and DARPA, but the internet was going to be just basically a great communication tool between a few institutions. Like it wasn't meant for the people. My invention allowed it to actually get to everybody. In his invention and the people that worked on it, right? And so that was such a great example of how it's not just the base technology. Sometimes there needs to be an accelerant kind of added to it. And if your purpose is how are we going to get this to everybody, back to your question about longevity and that sort of things, is there will be World Wide Web type pieces that will allow that to happen, to get health to everybody, to get longevity to everybody. And we need to make sure that is a main part of our plan, right? The one that I won't go deep into because I don't want to get us too much on a tangent is basically, I believe that if we open up the information from health data to everyone, and so there's ways to do that to make the health data more private and to open it up for everybody to run research on it. And I mean everybody with a laptop and an internet connection. I think that is one of those accelerants that will open things up, because a lot of times, a lot of the money spent to make a new breakthrough or make a new health device or health, algorithm is getting the data. And that's why you have so much money spent on getting the data. Clinical trials is an example of spending a ton of money to get data. You're getting data on whether the thing works or not, or whether it's safe.
I'm so confused, but who are these companies paying for the data?
So clinical trials would be an example. Like they need to. Most companies are spending the most money on creating the data in-house.
Creating the data, okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so, basically, if we want to democratize things and to bring price down and all these things, one of the kind of World Wide Web, analogies I would put in the health space is open up all the data, allow everybody access. And then when I say open up all the data, keep the original data completely private, open up the synthetic data. And I think that's one of those pieces that spending time with Tim really kind of hit home with me, is like, you don't need to change the entire system. Sometimes you need to be the person who pushes over the domino. Like Tim didn't fly around the world making sure that everybody connected the World Wide Web. That was not, but he created something that was just so that everybody saw and was like, yes, I will connect that to the system. I will do that. I will do that. And yeah, he sat on kind of committees and stuff like that, but Tim just needed to tip the domino.
Yeah.
He didn't need to recreate the system. And I guess that's my kind of rah-rah speech for, and kind of advice for like entrepreneurs in health is like, and investors in health is like, we don't need to recreate the system. We need to make sure that we are making that thing that then everybody just looks at and is like, yeah, we should do that too. And that's how the whole system changes, you know.
How do you do that? Is it intuition or is it data?
Or both. If I can, you know, if you're not a fan of yourself, who is, kind of like, if I could say one strength that I've had in my career is it's not to be the person who came up with all the good ideas, definitely not, but the person that was slightly better, or at least, you know, was batting at, you know, 55%, you know, decently picking the thing that was going to be the thing that worked. And so I'm quite good, especially in a systemic analysis of like what could be that domino. And I think that's what makes me focus on the health data.
So are you making an example of like Apple and Microsoft, et cetera? They weren't the first ones to invent something, but they made it better and more appealing to the public to actually adopt it in masses.
Yeah, and I would actually, in that exact vein, I would say, and everybody might not think about this every day, but everybody understands it, like all software on earth is built on top of open source. There's not one piece of software running on any of our consumer devices that isn't built on top of open source. Open source meaning that it was built and available to everybody. And so all of our economies, all of our sectors, all the trillions of dollars of businesses are built on top of public goods. It's one way to put it. The Web3 space calls it that, and I love that kind of nomenclature. So it's not that public goods is about giving everything for free, and then over here is business, and over here is public good. Now, public good is always the foundational piece for every sector. And so the software space, your Microsofts, your everybody like that, is built on top of a public good, which is a huge base of open source software that was just built because people wanted to, you know, move forward. You know,
wow.
They wanted to build out Linux. They wanted to build out, you know, all these things, and then everybody came in and built on top of it, right? And so, I think in the health space, again, the analogy I would see is the health data.
Fascinating. I mean, with what you were saying about health data, and that's coming from somebody that obviously has no idea how to actually, you know, make any of that come true. Mm-hmm. But surely, if you find a way to just encrypt the idea of whose data it is, health data, then you can just, in fact, distribute it to everybody without, like, I wouldn't mind people using for the benefit of the world all of my health data as long as it's anonymous who I am, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm just thinking of how far we want to go down the rabbit hole. So to tie this in with something that everybody's experiencing right now, so like generative AI and kind of LLMs, right? The reason why, one of the main reasons why they work better than anything we had before is because they basically they take a ton of data and they are much better at finding all the relationships between all that data. Then they leave all that data behind and they just have all the relationships, and it's very badly named latent space. But that basically means it has all the information, kind of relationships between all that original data. So like LLMs just understand us. Why do they just understand us? Because they just understand all the relationships in a meaningful way, not in a keywording kind of way, right? And so then you have all the relationships, like the essence of that original data. And then you can basically, if you want to, can create just a bunch of fake data that has that same essence. And so when you go through steps like that, it is possible to leave behind to leave behind your data, but it kind of just learned all the relationships between it, and then it recreates it over here. And there's other privacy steps in the middle, but that's the opportunity that now is proving that it's possible. And once something's possible, my favorite story is the Wright brothers, right? And so like 5 or 6 days before the Wright brothers like had their flights, they're the first ones that had like a sustainable flight and kind of proved to the world that, you know, you could fly, humans could fly a plane, you know. 5 or 6 days before that, there was a New York Times op-ed, and I might get the kind of the timing wrong, but it was like right before it, that said, you know, it'll be 1 million years before man is able to fly. And whatever was going through that person's head who wrote that stupid piece, whatever statement they were trying to make, it was clear that it was an op-ed against the Wright brothers and everything that was happening there. 5 days later, they you know, 1 million years,
that did
5
not
days,
age
right?
well at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It was a quickly, badly aging thing.
Yeah.
But that's not the coolest part, because people can have their opinions and people say, you know, things for a myriad of stupid reasons. 66 years later, 66 years later, we're standing on the moon. So we went hundreds of years where, you know, Leonardo da Vinci and everybody had their drawings and their contraptions and everything. Hundreds of years, fully had the idea of how you would fly, but everybody stood around saying, it's not possible. It's not possible. Very smart people that well-intentioned half the time, probably, were saying, not possible, right? Someone just went out and, you know, not just someone just went out and did it. Tons of people believed, even though a bunch of people thought they were crazy. The Wright brothers finally, you know, take a lot of credit for it, but like finally was able to do it. 66 years later, we're standing on the moon. That's kind of how things always work. It's not step change of like this discovery. It's when humans step back for a second and have some moment where that makes them believe. Then the floodgates open and things happen near immediately. 66 years to get from first flight to the moon is near immediately, kind of, you know, timescale.
I mean, everything that we're looking at around us and everything that exists once didn't. Mm-hmm. And so someone by definition did that for the first time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess there should be always an increasing amount of people that just have that belief. Mm-hmm. And are comfortable going into uncharted territories.
Yeah.
Very scary.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the better definitions of entrepreneurialism is exactly what you just said. I think that is entrepreneurialism at its best, I think, is when people are willing to weather the storm of disbelief because they truly believe. And I think that was, you know, me and Pete sitting there with humanity, we basically were like, we don't see a reason why you can't kind of, we know this, everybody believes in this feedback loop, you know, it's like scientifically published and everybody, you know, peer reviewed, like you can actually measure a person's probability of disease. The data is public, like everybody, we can do that. We don't see why we can't just continually measure someone's biological age and watch what they're doing, and then over a few 100,000 users, start to figure out exactly what each type of person needs to be doing. Mm. And we also don't see why we can't convince them to change their behavior, because that's all we've ever done. We did a dating app that changed behavior. Mm. People complain about Instagram because it changes behavior too much. Like, we all, again...
It's not in the best way.
Yeah, we all, again, know that it's possible, just like people knew it was possible to fly that plane. Mm. But people would continually just tell each other it's not possible. We had no scientific reason to believe that it wasn't possible to fly that plane.
Believe it.
Yeah, but that's
So the entrepreneur is the person that sees it before it's manifest.
Yeah, and just logically probably sees the world a little bit more real. Like there's no reason why we couldn't fly that plane. There's no reason why we couldn't create, you know, humanity and actually change people's behavior. And now we've proven that. And now we want to scale it and we want to, you know, partner with more people. And so I think just logically questioning other people's opinion and at the same time questioning your own opinion. But if you can't find a good reason why something's not possible and you really, really want that thing to exist in the world, that's what you do, right?
Make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
If I asked you, what do you think are the personality traits of yours that have yielded you most benefit over the years?
It's a tough question. I sometimes feel that some personality traits are double-edged swords.
It's a stick with two ends, for sure.
Yeah. You ask my wife, I think it would be, some of the things that I just said were quite good about being an entrepreneur can also be kind of annoying if you have to hang out with that person every single day. I think one that I said the other day that I think is actually quite important for my humanity journey. When I joined Anchor Free and I knew nothing about like TCP/IP and like how the internet works, like how packets of information go around the internet, it probably wasn't that hard for me to ask all the stupid questions because who knows how that stuff works other than the people working in that. But when I got into more of the science and health space, I think that was one thing I just needed to continually tell myself is you got to ask the stupid questions. If you don't know what that person just said to you, like what was the point of even being in the room if you don't just stop them? And I think eventually you realize that like you will end up in a much better place if you ask the stupid questions. Because if you don't understand something, you can't interact with it, and it doesn't help anybody.
So true.
So I think that's one of the personality traits that I can be maybe slightly abrasive when I really believe in something, but it's also the other side of what. Where was I? Should I start again or?
No, just pick up.
Okay.
Closest.
Yeah. So I think what we're talking about before, I think, and I would say it maybe in a slightly more negative way. Like I can sometimes have an abrasive way of like if I truly believe in something, I'm quite upfront with people about it. But I think it said in the more positive way is like have confidence in your ideas, but be open to learn from other people too. I think I get that balance generally right, and I think. If you combine being not too proud to ask stupid questions, and then because that allows you to get a strong mental framework of how things work, and then you can have stronger opinions and useful opinions.
And more convincing also speaking to other people and joining in your mission.
Yeah. And I think people want to get a sense of, like me, you, all of us don't ever really understand if the person really understands something completely. We're always just trying to get a sense, right? And I think, asking stupid questions and then having a better mental framework then allows me to at least sound like and truly be a person who kind of knows what they're speaking about in the science and health space, right? And there's a huge amount of stuff I don't know, but that operationally allows me to navigate in that space. So I think that's probably one of the personality traits of being slightly arrogant when I need to be, but or just believing in what I believe, but then being perfectly okay to be like, I'm sorry, I didn't really understand what you just meant.
Yeah.
Like, or that sounded kind of cool, but can you explain it to me, in a different way? Like those, when you get free with doing that, I think you end up having much better, deeper conversations. So
that makes a lot of sense. I just had another question pop into my mind, which is how do you deal with your energy, your output, I guess? So, I mean, I've had this with, my coaching clients, myself as well over the years. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing to just make sure that you can continuously produce and continuously perform. So what's your secret? If you have one, or what's your protocol of being well-performing over long periods of time?
I wouldn't say that I do it well. So I'm probably
you get stuff done, clearly.
I think, definitely don't do it efficiently. Not that I don't want to and that I don't want to improve all the time. And I probably do move in a generally improving direction with that. I think truly believing in the mission and wanting the thing is the saving grace of inefficiency of taking care of oneself sometimes. I don't think I don't want this to be advice to people because I don't think it's the best way to do it. But I think you wake up in the morning and whether you're tired or you're not tired, if you have a thing that you just know you need to do and that the world needs,
it gets done.
It's easier to keep going. I think it definitely is a big problem in the world with especially very mission-driven people where they don't necessarily take care of themselves that well sometimes. I definitely have those moments. You definitely, and when you care deeply about something, you can definitely get hurt deeper as well. So you can get disappointed in people. So I think there's definitely those moments that I find with having family and then close friends that you can just spend time with, even if it's just like lying on a couch together and just like, sometimes that's the most healing times.
The togetherness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you kind of to encompass a little bit everything that you've shared about your journey in the various countries and various industries. I also noticed that there's kind of a interesting progression that I can resonate with in terms of your purpose evolution. So again, really, I can relate, just that desire to help people. Mm-hmm. And so
I really want to ask you a bunch of questions, but I'm not sure if that's the format of...
We can definitely go there. We can definitely go there. I'll let you ask me some questions afterwards. So it went from you connecting people, so like it facilitating these relationships, mm-hmm. to then you helping people, well, have a voice and have information, so be connected also on a different level. So I guess freedom is like the word that comes to my mind when I think about that side of your business. And now ultimately, which for me as well, I think is the ultimate level, is the health and well-being, mm-hmm. which is the basis, like the absolute most important thing out of all. Yeah. So kind of, I see that. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that is true?
Yeah, I mean, that sounded like a nice
okay.
wrap up
so
of it all.
It's not just my perception. Okay.
Basically exactly what you said. I think I believe in, if there's like base beliefs that kind of can be a common thread. Like I believe in the goodness of humans. I believe that left to their own devices, they will do good things, en masse. They will collaborate. They will do good things together. And so giving, it always seems like the most expedient, quickest way to change the world in a positive direction is to get some tool out to them and to get it out to as many hundreds of millions of them as possible, as quickly as possible. Yeah. That always seems to be in my mind, and that's the way that's why I've created or joined teams that were able to have products like that.
So with all the experience that you've had, success that you've had in your own businesses, learning from the companies that were successful that you worked in and for, mm-hmm. and learning from incredible individuals that you've been fortunate to, know and spend time with. I know this is a very broad question, but if there is any pattern that you've elevated, is there a habit or a belief?
Curiosity. Yeah.
Noted.
Curiosity, because if you start with people are good and they want to do good, the people that can navigate better are the curious ones, and they find out deeper what the problem might be, and they find out deeper what possible solutions there might be, and they find that out quicker and better. So curiosity, definitely. I mean, anybody that has the pleasure of hanging out with Tim for any amount of time will just be astounded by his curiosity, like next level curiosity.
Really?
I've seen him just go into conversation, completely different sectors. And he's not jumping into, I have this opinion, which I probably do all the time, jumping into, I have this opinion about that space, or let's talk about this one thing that his ratio is probably 70% questions and 30%, statements, maybe even more on the question side.
Amazing. So, my favorite ratio is 90% questions, as you can observe.
So there you go.
Let me give you.
So you have it.
Yeah. Let me give you the 10% portion now. Ask away, whatever you want to ask me.
What do you see as your purpose?
My purpose, I think I've intuitively known since very early age, is to help people in some way. Mm-hmm. What I didn't know is what is that way. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a singer or an actress, mm-hmm. because music touched me very deeply, and movies often inspired me very much. So because they created these strong emotions for me, I thought, well, I want to give those emotions to other people as well, so I should do that. Obviously, growing up and being from Latvia and being realistic also at the same time, I didn't quite ever pursue those avenues. But yeah, growing up, it was process of going through life, I guess, practically, and trying to use method of elimination to understand what is then the path that I have to go to by excluding what I definitely don't have to do. So as a bit of
by trying all the things.
By trying some. So I don't think I've had any sort of, to give you a context of my background, I worked in luxury sales for 8 years. I moved to Italy when I just turned 19. And so then after 5.5 years, I moved to UK, and that was all kind of for sales. And I mean, I loved that because I got to connect to people, and I got to influence them in a little bit, because every time that they'd come in my showroom, my unknown intention at the time would be to make them feel better and to exit in a more happy state than when they came in. And that was probably the reason why I was doing really, really well. But to answer your question, what is my purpose? I think my purpose is to inspire people, to educate and motivate them. I think that the best way that I can do it has to be inherent to who I am as a person and what I naturally do well and enjoy doing, a bit of an ikigai formula. And so, for example, the podcast for me ticks all the boxes because I get to connect to people. I get to express and feed my curiosity, which I've always had a lot. So I get to learn from amazing people. I get to, in a way, foster a community by enlarging my circle with people that I find amazing and inspiring, which at a certain point in my past, I really felt almost suffocated and thirsty for this energy of people that I would love to be surrounded with and to learn from. And I didn't have that. And of course, I didn't know back in that moment that, okay, well, later I would do podcasts and that would kind of solve it. But that's just one aspect of it. Then
I love that about one of my favorite things of running Humanity is it gives me a reason to reach out to very interesting people.
Right?
Yeah. It cannot be understated how important being able to feed curiosity and getting to hang out with people doing amazing stuff definitely is helpful mental health wise. So.
Gives flavor to life, literally. And that's one aspect of it. The main aspect is the service part. So I get to talk about things that I think are important and I think are important for all the people. So for example, the reason why the podcast is born is my purpose, obviously, as we're talking about it. And I want to talk about purpose itself because I don't think enough people think about it or have ever thought about it or verbalize it or strive for it, because I think it makes such a difference in the quality of your life and your emotional well-being if you have it.
And the quality of your output and what you bring into the world.
Absolutely. So it's all connected. So even I remember when I just started, I was so profoundly happy when some people came to me like, because you ask every time in your podcast, what is your purpose to people? They were like, I never thought about it. And I was there and I was thinking, I was like, yes, hallelujah.
Mission accomplished.
The mission accomplished, exactly. And so if it's only...
And then you're just giving a taster set of purposes
and it's
that they can kind of look at.
Yeah, and it's okay that some people say, I don't know. And some people say, that means that to me. And some people say, that means something else to me. And that's all so valid. And that's also the reason why I'm interviewing such different people. For some people, it's like, what's the theme? I don't want to interview just athletes, just entrepreneurs, just artists, because how many people are there in the world? How many different talents are there? How many different interests? We're all important and we're all valid. And so by you listening to somebody, if you have a wide array of choice of people, you'll find something that is for you and that resonates with you. And that's...
And many of those purposes, even though on the surface it seems like different sectors, like athlete and entrepreneur or
The
something
overlap.
like that. Like the purposes can be the same.
Absolutely.
It's just a different way to get there.
And that is different. That is interesting in and of itself as well. Seeing those patterns, which is what I want to do over time. Also seeing those patterns, like what makes sense, what connect. And that's not even it. So I asked. So there's the service part, because it just makes, I'm a logical and pragmatic person as well. It just makes so much sense. Like if I'm fortunate enough to have this conversation with you off camera, great for me. What if I could film it and include other people in it? Even if it's one person that listens to it and gets something from it, awesome.
Yeah.
You know, it's more than just me.
Yep.
So there's the service part, there's the connection part, there's the curiosity part. And what I found is oftentimes with people that I speak to and interview, they come out nice and light out of that interaction. They're like, that was very therapeutic. You asked me some things I haven't thought about in decades. And so it's even nice for them oftentimes, which makes me even happier. So it's just like, great. Just makes all the sense in the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But that's one thing. Then equally, I thought, you know what? How can I make the impact of helping someone even more bespoke, therefore more precise and more impactful by coaching? And so that's another avenue for me. So one-to-one coaching, and in the future would love to do also group coaching. Obviously that, allows you to scale and help more people even.
Yeah.
And, who knows what the future holds? Maybe it's writing, maybe it's speaking, retreats for sure. So everything is, it's.
Yeah, you got to have the in-person. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's all about, in essence, it's all about connection. It's all about connection, service.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for asking.
So my second and last question, or I don't know how much time we have.
We got all the time.
How can people help you with your purpose? The people.
Honestly, listen to the podcast, share it, ask me what you want to hear about more or see of more. Give me feedback, please, always. And if I can help you with coaching, or is there anything else that you want me to cover or speak about or find out about, just let me know. That's
nice. Thank
you for asking. That's great. The one thing that people do come to me and they tell me is, you never talk about yourself. You just talk about yourself. But I'm guilty. I will raise my hand. It's easy to be on this side and asking questions, especially when you're used to it and you have all those kind of curiosity components and everything.
Yep.
So you just kind of really relax into that. And it's not easy to be on the spotlight, weirdly. Yep. But thanks to amazing guests like yourself, I can share little snippets of what matters. Michael, what have I not asked you that I should have?
All the tough questions. I think you've covered so much. I think might have rambled through a few of the answers, but you asked all the questions. I think, maybe to the question of that I asked you is just, what can people watching, if they want to get involved in what the general area that we're working with humanity. One thing we're doing a crowd raise. So we really believe in decentralization. We would love people to be, owners and, love having all the cool people, but all the curious people with us. I think the other is I am very happy to spend a bunch of my time, or lack thereof, of focused on pushing over some dominoes. And so I think people that are interested in making health data more private, but opening it up to the information from it up to everybody to learn from and to really democratize access to that. Would love to talk to people that want to push over those dominoes with me. And there's already some big names and organizations that are helping, but I think the more of us that are doing it, the faster it will happen.
Yeah.
So that's about it. But I think you've asked some great questions.
Thank you. That makes me very happy. And on topic of happy, we are at our last question, which is, what is your recipe for happiness?
Recipe for happiness. Definitely spending time with curious and interesting people. I think yeah, we were lucky enough to spend some time on an ice retreat together.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, exactly. I think that definitely makes me very happy. I like smaller. I'm an introvert generally, so I like spending time with family and a couple friends and kind of, just getting to just hang out and have interesting conversations and just kind of share, human connection. And I think that's what I would love to be doing almost all the time, and moving forward a project and doing that. If I could just like spend the rest of my days in that direction, I think that's definitely it. I think I get up on stage and I go to big events and stuff because I think that helps. But I'm most happy when I'm sitting in a living room with family and friends and having interesting conversations and knowing that we're all kind of pushing the world in a positive place. So.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Hello, friends. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe and share it with someone. I would love to hear your feedback and suggestions as to what guests you would like to see on the show next. See you next week.